the record. And so, welcome everybody who's tuning in to this opportunity I have to interview Jacob Watson, a beloved type 2. And I'm broadcasting here from South Portland, Maine, at the on the verge of spring, and just good to be here. So,
Yeah.
anyway, for those of you who don't know me, Michael Naylor, and I'm the director of the Maine Enneagram Center for Transformation and Wellbeing. And so that said, thank you for being here with me, Jacob, and we'd just love to hear a bit about your relationship with the two personality and your experience that you've had with it.
Yeah. Well, Michael, as we begin, I want to thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for being you. You are, I would say, a fountain of goodwill and expertise emanating from South Portland.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I do try.
Really. Well, it shows not only on Facebook, but I remember very well the workshop you did for CHIME, the
Yeah.
Chaplaincy Institute of Maine, some years ago, and I hope that continues. Hope we continue to present for them.
Thank you.
So I'm grateful to be part of the conversation, the ongoing conversation, I would say.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I haven't done a lot of work with Enneagram, but it's really been interesting to me to investigate type 2, and it's like a horse race. It's like, is it type 2 or type 9? But it's been really really helpful and really interesting, especially at my age where I'm both living in the present, which I'm pretty good at doing, and a little bit into the future, but a lot in the past. And a couple of years ago, I compiled a memoir, so that gave me an extra impetus to take a look at the past, and particularly with the type 2 being the caregiver and the generous person, and then looking at the dark side of that too, getting over involved and pretending that it's all okay when it's really not okay. and having to look and delve into and stir around in the dark side. That's been, I would say, an integral part of my growth. But I go way back to, I'm just thinking back now to college, and I never felt really that I fit in. Probably that's also going back to high school. I went to a traditional New England prep school for 4 years, and when I look back at that, my goal was to survive that, and that was pretty basic. I just needed to survive that experience, being away from home at a young age of 13 and trying to figure all that out. And it's been fascinating because my high school classmates now have, because of the pandemic, we didn't have our 60th reunion in person, but that has elicited a copious email conversation among all my, not all, but most of my classmates, looking back at our time together. And it hasn't changed. I didn't fit in then, and I don't fit in now.
I know what you mean.
I mean, I certainly have appreciated the new connections that we've established by email. I'm very grateful for that. And there's been some good connections, certainly, but I still don't feel like I'm part of the class.
Some things never change.
Yeah. And I think there's a quality of type 2, the people pleaser, that's familiar to me. And I can see over the years how that's both been positive in the sense that it's allowed me to connect with people at a less surface level, like a really a deep level. And also it's gone into the negative where I've given up, I would say, taking care of myself in order to please others. So that's been a theme. And in college, again, I think I only survived college because I found a tiny little creative writing program at this huge university, the University of Pennsylvania. And the few friends that I had were all in the engineering college or the Wharton Business School. And there was a brand new, I think I was in the first class, there were 12 people in this creative writing program. And I lived and died for those classes and did not care about anything else. And I don't think I would have stayed in college except for that class. We had a wonderful visiting writers program where established authors came and not only shared their work, but listened, you read hours. And that was a wonderful experience for me. And then I was going to go into the Peace Corps, and that didn't happen either. So that was the beginning of really starting things. I taught at a Summerhill school right out of college, and that was a school, no accident for a type 2, that was run by the kids. If somebody had a problem, whether it was a teacher or a student, they'd go out and they'd ring the school bell and the whole school would stop. And that in itself was a powerful experience for all of us. And they would listen to you.
Amazing.
Again, that was such a gift.
Yes. So very relational. It's like the relationships mattered.
Yes, they really mattered. In fact, they mattered more than academic studies.
Yeah.
And that was a huge lesson to me because I had grown up and gone to school in very traditional, even conservative schools. So I think after college, I made sometimes look back and I describe it as making a hard turn left.
I'm familiar with that too.
Are you?
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you just a question about, type 2s are often talk about that they feel a great sensitivity to people suffering and have very responsive hearts and have a real wish for connection with people. That like the heart connection is a lifeline for them. And of course, when they're healthy, they do that skillfully, and maybe under stress can tend to overwork and over lean in and maybe take on too much. But in that spectrum, there is this real intuitive sense that our hearts are meant to be connected, and then there's the personality and how we deal with that creature. So I just wonder what you notice, through your evolution.
Well, I love your phrase that our hearts are meant to be connected. That really goes to my core, I think, because I really believe that. And those early Summerhill School meetings were about that, because somebody rang the bell and we listened. And what we listened to was probably not a math problem or a literature issue. It was probably something that was indeed coming from their hearts. And I spent 2 years teaching at that school, and then I came to Maine and I started a similar school in 1969. So it really went deep. It was a formative experience.
Well, that's really interesting in that 1969 is when I was in or 1970, my freshman year of college, and I picked up the book Summerhill. And it just blew me away. It just really? Like my whole life perception and how human beings could be together. It was a part of a hard left, and just I just adored that book, and A.S. Neal, and just all of the principles of loving kindness and just remarkable, and the democracy in the school was just, and people having a voice. And so I mean, that was one of the books that just changed my life. So
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, so you started a school in Freeport.
Yeah. Yeah. It was called the Collins Brook School for the brook that ran through.
Hmm.
And, in many ways, especially looking back with the perspective of being 79,
Mhm.
I had no idea what I was doing, but I was following something that
Wow.
was certainly heart-based.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to create a place where there was the bell and anybody could ring the bell and things would stop and people would say, well, who rang the bell and why? That was the common what people said. And I love the fact that the bell that I found for Collins Brook was a bell that my father had had on his US Navy warship.
Wow.
So it was a transformation of that bell from a warship
Hmm.
creating war and
Hmm.
suffering
Hmm.
to creating peace and finding a way in those meetings to work through hassles.
Yeah, and I can remember just what really also was so awakening was a whole principle of nonviolence,
Mm,
and also this idea. For me, at that time, I was a strict Catholic, and was beginning to question some of the fear-based philosophy.
mm,
And I loved. I mean, there's something about the way Neil articulated philosophy of the school that really raised the question, like, if there's this loving being that creates the universe, wouldn't that loving being be in service of kindness and nonviolence? And it was like,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, it just totally, my whole relationship to God, higher powers, just flipped on its head. So anyway, yeah, so that's awesome.
Yeah. So I ran the school for 7 years. And this is where I got into it. By the sixth or seventh year, I was falling into my dark side
Mhm.
because I wasn't paying very much attention at all to myself,
Yeah.
like what was really going on in me. And it was too much responsibility for me to, because I took it all on, of
Mhm.
course, being a two.
Uh-huh.
And
I will love all of you.
yeah, and we started with 5 students the first year, and that grew 5-day students, and then very quickly we built our own buildings. We built our classroom, and then the next summer, this is all volunteers that came to live with us for the summer, and we built a dormitory and a big dining room, kitchen, and a big
Wow.
classroom, and we had boarding students.
Wow.
So at our peak, there were probably 55 or so students. And by the fifth, sixth year of the school, I was burning out. My marriage was in trouble because we were both putting a lot of energy into the school
Hmm.
and making it work, making it survive, and so forth. And then times changed. Two things happened really was, in addition to our marriage burning out and me burning out personally because I was running the school, the times changed, and some of the ideas from Summerhill schools worked their way into public schools, and we had a brief moment of schools without walls, and
Hmm.
uh,
I remember
would
that.
have been around 1975, 1976,
Hmm.
open classrooms, things
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, it didn't last very long.
The walls came back up.
Right. Yeah, the walls came back up. Yeah. So anyway, Collinsbrook closed after the school year in 1976. It was a dark time for me. I saw it as a failure, and I felt very, very badly for the students that I had that wanted to stay in the school, and I couldn't do it anymore. There was a
Well,
there was a brief attempt to keep the school going with somebody else that didn't work.
hmm.
So I was really completely at loose ends.
Well, I wonder, one of the things that the type twos will say is one of the biggest sort of turning points for them is when they became aware that they weren't taking care of themselves, that they were so, we say they have just such great attunement to the needs of others. It just takes their attention. It's like a magnet. And noticing, well, I've got needs too. It was just almost counterintuitive, because it's just like they're, and and I just wondered for you how it sounds like burning, really getting overworked and burning out created a shift or maybe another kind of inquiry around looking at, well, maybe I have needs myself. I just wondered how that happened for you.
Well, it didn't happen quickly. It did not happen quickly, and it did not happen easily.
Uh-huh.
There was, there were, I would say, 3 or 4 years of really not knowing not only what I was doing, but who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in different places. I had a couple of different relationships. I didn't have a career. There was one point where I was standing in the Freeport town hall in the welfare line, getting a welfare check to put food on the table. And the germ, again, I can look back on it and I can perhaps see with a little more clarity than I did then, because nothing felt clear then. As the director of the school, I was in the position of people coming to me when they had problems. So I learned during that time that was valuable. That was valuable to the person, and that was valuable to me. And so it wasn't the whole school. It was just one person at a time. So there was some healthy instinct in me that glommed onto that, I think. And I went back to school and worked towards and received a master's degree in counseling.
Oh, okay.
So that was a big transition that it took way longer than I wanted, because it was really hard, really difficult. And I was, as I said, at very loose ends, and nothing made sense to me during that time. But then when I got into counseling, and the germ of that started at the school.
Well, so that in that transformation, again, one of the things that twos will say is that sometimes in their hard wiring and based on how they grew up, the idea of asking for help for themselves seemed to always come last. They were so good at just responding to the suffering and needs of others. And like my wife had explained, when I start to feel a need, but you show up and you have a need, it's almost like mine disappears and all I see is yours, right? And she said it's just like a magnetic pull. So twos often say that really it's a slow, steady effort to finally start to balance that. So what was true for you?
I think you're absolutely right about that, because in a way, going back to school was a very selfish thing, because it doesn't involve anybody else. I'm the one that has to come up with the tuition, and I'm the one that has to get myself down to Boston to the classes and so forth. And it was a commitment that maybe I couldn't do other things. I had to do this thing that was focused on myself. So it was a time of, I guess the negative word is selfishness, but there was a positive part to that too, where I was indeed taking care of myself. And it worked in the sense that it gave me skills that deepened my ability to sit with people and really be, I think, honest about what was going on, and therefore be a compassionate listener.
Yeah, and I think you point to something again that twos often say. It's like going in and seeing my own dark side. So they often say, I've got an inner critic that says that's selfish. Talking about there's somebody. Twos usually have such a strong intuition of who needs help, and the inner critic goes, you see it, you got to go help them, right?
Right.
And if not, you're lazy. It's like, well, what about me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's laughs,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it's quite a powerful inner current to navigate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that, yeah, that was significant, really significant. And then I opened a counseling practice, and I had begun now to focus on grief, both in my own life. I think grieving who I used to be to try to show up for who I was in the present moment. And so I kind of stumbled on the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and that really touched me. And I remember it so well at my first workshop with her, and I was on the mat in front of 60 or 70 people. And that in itself for a two, what do you mean? In front of other people?
Focus on you.
But that was how she designed the workshops. And I don't think I went on the first day. I probably went in the very end of the second day. I found myself, and at that point, I was in a lot of pain because my 2-year-old son and his mother was moving out of the state. So I thought, losing touch with him. And so that's where I started with Elizabeth working with me. And I was really pissed off and angry and mad about all that, and very deeply sad and grieving. I imagined that I would lose touch with my son, and I didn't want that because I loved him dearly. And after I got through all of that, Elizabeth leaned in. She said, what about your own 2-year-old inside you?
Wow.
I'm going, oh yeah. At that point, I was deeply into my feelings about my son Nathan and losing touch with him. But Elizabeth, as always, nailed me. And what about your own 2-year-old? Meaning the inner child, that person that holds our most tender feelings inside, and as well as our anger and all of that. So that was a whole other hour of work. Just hour with Elizabeth, but many, some years after that, just really uncovering that. Because I certainly grew up in a New England family where feelings were not accepted.
Yeah, so it sounds like you got to spend a lot of time with her, or at workshops, or teaching with her. I mean,
Well, eventually I joined her staff and worked with her. And then when she semi-retired, I was leading workshops around the country and helping other people do what I had been able to do.
Yeah, I didn't realize that she did kind of mat work and really creating the environment for emotion to come forward and be expressed.
Yes,
So,
she did.
That's awesome. I did a version of that when I took my sharp left turn when I went to California and did primal therapy. Work for many, many years, and then most recent, about 10 years ago, was the Hoffman process, which also uses that really impactful emotional sharing. So, and I found it very, very helpful, very helpful.
Yeah.
So,
It
so
certainly was. Yeah, and I have to bring us up to date briefly because Elizabeth's son Ken Ross, who, when he was young, he knew he wanted to be in contact with his mother, but his mother was very famous and going all over the world speaking. So he did a really smart thing for a teenager. He hooked himself up with her and followed her around.
Wow.
And I remember meeting him for the first time in Alaska when we were doing a workshop. In fact, we roomed together. But I bring him up because he has kind of reinvigorated the Kubler-Ross work by establishing several years ago a Kubler-Ross Foundation that's global in nature and has programs in, I would say, 6 or 8 countries around the world.
Wow,
And
that's awesome.
I've been teaching by Zoom program in Guatemala and Brazil and a few other countries this winter, and that's coming up to an end now. But I just wanted to let you know that that kind of work in the Kubler-Ross form is continuing.
Awesome. That's very good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so after after that, how did things unfold? Because I was just thinking, too, is when they develop sort of their own way of expressing, bringing loving kindness, unconditional love, healing. They go forward. They keep doing it. They find another route.
Yeah.
They create that. So I just wondered what was true for you.
Well, when I was doing counseling, that was a good fit for a while. And then I began to feel that still small voice inside. And being a good two, I said, no, I don't want to listen to that. It must be about me. It's not all right to listen to a voice about me.
Yeah.
I put it off for quite a while and wasn't listening to it. And then my counseling office caught fire and burned. Literally.
Divine intervention.
Divine intervention. We can say that now.
Yeah.
If you had said that to me back then, I would have punched you.
I hear you. I hear you.
So, I mean, I was sitting outside on the sidewalk waiting for the fire engines to come, and smoke was pouring out of my windows. And if you had come along that sidewalk,
divine intervention.
Later, many years later, can I say that?
Yeah.
And can I agree with that? But
yeah.
What that was about was, of course, not paying attention to my own needs. But it was also about realizing that when people were coming to me after they'd had a tragedy or a grief-inducing loss of some kind, some major kind, they were certainly bringing their emotions, their anger and their sadness and so forth. And at that point, I was pretty skilled with helping them externalize those. And many times people would say, I feel so deeply, I must be insane. I must be mad. And I said, no, you're not mad, you're feeling. That's how much depth you have to your feelings. And there was something underneath that. And what that was, I can again say from the perspective that I have now, was the spiritual dimension. They had the emotional part, but there was the spiritual part. When somebody had a death occur in their family, that was certainly cause for many natural emotions. And yet the feelings led to a spiritual crisis as well. In fact, when they expressed their feelings, they were expressing their spirit.
Well, that certainly sort of aligns with what we talk about in the Gurdjieff work and the Enneagram work, which is as you excavate emotional suffering and express it, you develop more freedom, but then it opens something else up deeper, which is a connection with, I use the word essence or the divine or God or the mystery. And then that nags you, right? You get through the suffering, and then there's this voice going, "You're not finished. You've just begun. You've just begun a new journey." It's like, well, I don't want a new journey. Too bad. You open the door.
Too bad. Yeah, I'm chuckling at the first word you used to describe that was essence.
Yeah.
And that's the name of the book that I wrote.
Yes.
About the natural emotions leading to the spiritual life.
Awesome. Yeah.
And so that when I began to really not just understand, because understand it's also often reflective of the intellect. This was understanding at a much deeper level.
Yes.
At a core level for me.
Yeah.
then that was the signal for me to do what twos really have a hard time doing. Again, I went back to school. Oh no.
Yeah.
Selfish SOB.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went back to school. This time it was ministry school,
Oh.
and went to Matthew Fox's program. You were talking about being a strict Catholic, and
Mhm.
Matthew Fox, of course, is a wonderful spiritual teacher, and one of his early books was Original Blessing,
Yes, I read that.
opposed to Original Sin. So
Yeah, yeah.
it was wonderful studying with him. And then I
Mm.
was also in a parallel program where I was ordained as an interfaith minister. So that was, I think, the culmination of really cleaning out. I mean, it's a constant everyday process, but cleaning out the dark side of type 2 and really going in there and doing spring cleaning,
Yeah.
year round cleaning
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And that was you also used the word a minute ago, freedom. And for type 2, I think when I can let go of the dark side of trying to solve everyone else's problems,
Mm.
there is freedom.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating too, because as we were talking about Summerhill and A.S. Neal, that was his core word, I think, to describe what happened in those schools. There was a sense of not only democracy
Mm.
for staff and students, but also a freedom.
Yeah. And so it just a couple things come to mind, this whole journey of healing, excavation of the true self, whatever you want to call it. It's like a spiral that goes down and down, and just you think you're finished with something, and now it's at a deeper level, and then oh, there's another level. Does this end? And the universe goes, no, maybe 10 lifetimes from now. But and that sometimes that deeper cut is more challenging than it's ever been because you're ready for it, or you have more tools, or but the spiral down, that what I have always been told, it's important, Michael, to have at least 3 men in your life who are more awake than you, because as you go down, you will be in new territory that your mind doesn't know how to navigate it. Right. And then also in a tight situation, your spiritual BS will be better than ever, and you'll dodge it, right? Unless she says the wiser you get, the better your spiritual BS is when you're under stress. So you better have some people around you that can go, Michael, you're caught. And that's been always, I find, at least every third year, it seems like I'm dropping into something I have never seen before. And I go, oh my God, have mercy on me. Do we have to do this again? And so it's that's just how it is. And then I have more freedom, and I'm more user friendly, and then I go through another crisis.
I like your phrase that this is how it is, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't. It reminds me of a little book that Elizabeth wrote for a 9-year-old boy who was dying of cancer, and his name was Dougie. And she wrote this book. She called it the Dougie Letter, in the letter form. And what essentially she said was that life is a school, and the lessons keep coming. There's lots more to it, but that's what I'm harvesting from our conversation just now, that there's lots more coming. And yes, we object and we think, oh no, this again?
Come on, God, give me a break. I'm supposed to arrive and be.
Like,
oh no.
And it's both and, isn't it? Because
it is.
I certainly feel that in some ways I've arrived, in the sense that I understand now that I have a spiritual life, I have a spirit, and I'm letting that express more and more as I age. And particularly, it's such a fascinating time now, because came home from the California schools that I just mentioned, and I started the Chaplaincy Institute of Maine, and then I ran that for something like, I don't know, 14 or 15 years. And then I was able to listen to the still small voice inside that says, Jacob, it's time to leave. And there was no reason. There was no intellectual reason. The school was fine. I was fine. I didn't feel like I was burned out like I had been with Brook School. I had a ton of really, really talented staff people that were running the school with me. When I started the school, I was the founding abbot, but I learned from my early experiences that I couldn't and didn't want to do this alone. So I gave away as much as I could, and you may know Patricia Allen. She helped out a lot in many years, and other wonderful staff people, and the students that showed up. It was incredible to see who walked through the door in the fall, in terms of students who were willing to commit themselves to this brand new school. So well, that was an important thing to do, and then to let go of.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wondered if you'd say a little bit about CHIME, and I've had the chance to teach, I think 3 or 4 times, and just always found the students to be so open-hearted and kind and present, and just, I mean, it's like what you always hope for in students, right? And there they are. It's like, this is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to learn so much from everyone, which is what always happens. It's like I get to be transmitted all these, wisdom to me. So, but anyway, I wondered, like, what was your wish and hope when you began the school?
I'll just start by saying that when I was finishing up the program in California, then I came home to Maine, and I felt really lonely. The teachers and most of the students were, if not in California, then at least scattered around the country. So I thought, well, how about a similar school here in Maine? And it was coincidental, a lot more than just coincidental. The last week of the chaplaincy program, some of us conspired to have take place here in Maine. So there were 5 of us in this small class, not in Matthew's school, but in the class of the Chaplaincy Institute that ordained us as interfaith ministers. So the 5 of us came to Maine, and we spent that week on the Sunbeam, which is the Maine Seacoast Mission boat, the ship that goes around to the islands down east, and like Matinicus and Monhegan and so forth, and provides spiritual care to the islanders. And so we got a look at that. And then that morphed into working on a chaplaincy program here in Maine. People said, well, Jacob, where were you and what you've been doing? And it was so easy to say that. And then we started kind of against all odds, because we didn't have a program fully designed with a definite curriculum and everything. But the board of trustees that I had gathered together said, we probably should wait. And I said, I don't want to wait. So we opened in 2002. And again, as I just said, the miraculous experience of seeing who walks through the door in September, every September since then, extraordinary people who I think have traveled many journeys on their own, but somewhat similar to what I was describing to you, where their hearts were ready to be open, and yet they didn't quite have, perhaps it was the permission or the pathway for that to happen. And then they somehow came across this school that was saying, we want your spirit.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, so for you, I wonder if you could say anything about any in particular, meditation practices or inside ways of operating with yourself that have been particularly helpful for you?
Yeah, I think um, I think studying with Matthew Fox was seminal for me because he has a wonderful book called um, One Well, Many Rivers, and there's a theme in the whole book. He goes into many different faith traditions and religions and so forth, but out of those he harvests silence, and he was a wonderful teacher in that regard. I think also Clarissa Pinkola Estes was wonderful, and also Andrew Harvey.
Oh, Andrew
Reminds
Harvey.
me of a story about Clarissa, because she was teaching. It's what you said about what we were saying earlier about men, and she was teaching this course, and she got at the end of the morning. We were about to finish up the class for lunch, and she'd been teaching about myth, and she had this glint in her eye as she was closing the class for the lunch break, and she looked at us, and this was a big class, probably about 45 or 50 people, only I'm going to say maybe 8 of whom were men. And she kind of looked at us with this twinkle in her eye, and she said, "All right, I want to meet with you guys for the lunch break." And we were going, why? What was that? But she had picked up something that I think, in retrospect, again, I think we were missing. We didn't get it. Like our intellect was engaged, but there was something missing.
Yeah.
And she got it, and she took us into the meditation room at the University of Creation Spirituality, and she said, "Okay, now we're going to be silent." And we're going, "What? You wanted to be with us for the lunch break." We were looking for some special teaching for men. And she said, "No, we're going to be silent."
Oh, how amazing.
So we went to lunch break.
Wow.
I mean, she let us eat our sandwiches, but it wasn't any more of the intellectual stuff.
Yeah, information. Yeah.
So that was a huge lesson, both Matthew and then from her. And I have to add Andrew Harvey in as well.
Yeah, he's quite a heartfelt, spiritual guy who's gone through some amazing things. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your experience with him.
Well, again, he was teaching this class out there, and I think it was either the first or the second class, probably the second class that I took out there. So I still felt, I mean, here I'm a New Englander, I'm in California. I really felt out of it, right? Out of anything familiar. And I being a type 2, I'm always in the front row, okay? Better or worse. I was in the front row, and he was getting ready for his class and looking over his notes or something. But we ended up talking a little bit, and he was extraordinarily soft and compassionate, and in fact pulled out one of his CDs and just gave it to me. And he started his class with meditation. And even in that context, that was off the wall. We were ready to jump in and learn these great spiritual truths. No, we're going to be quiet now and be quiet together. So again, that was a great, I would call it now, mystical teaching. Yeah. Just simply to be quiet, and the power of that. I had been a meditator for many years. I began meditating way back in the 70s, I think. I just understood that there was something precious about being still and allowing the silence to fill me in whatever way. And it's evolved over the years, but it continued during that program. And then when I came back and started CHIME here, I asked that. I was the director, I guess, so it had some more power than just asking. But all of our classes start with silence.
Yeah.
And I was insistent that even our staff meetings and our board of trustees meetings also begin with silence. It doesn't have to be very long, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it needs to start that way. And I think a primary goal of that or understanding of that is that when we are silent together, it really invites God or the Spirit or the Holy One to also be present. And that's at this point and back starting CHIME, that was essential. I really need that. And I need it so much that I'm willing to put it out there.
Yeah, absolutely. There is as if something enters the room of a higher intelligence. That's been my experience when something, and it's in the fabric, and this is just my little story on it, but it's potent. And, in the Gurdjieff work, and I've done diamond heart work and all of the work, this idea of developing, the capacity to come to inner stillness, and then, to commune with people is very sacred activity. And it also seems like it has a capacity to create sort of a unity. There's like the ego separation between people kind of dissolve for a period of time. And there's this openness, which in all of my trainings, I think we do a sitting on for every type, just taking even just a minute can be profound. So, it's powerful, and I couldn't live without it. Yeah.
How long have you been meditating?
Oh gosh, when did I start? Let's see. I think I started in 1982. I started meditating, and I had read Claudio Naranjo's book on how to meditate, and then Ram Dass's, but he's just started off with count your breaths and sit, and I had these remarkable experiences where it's like my whole universe opened up out of the blue several times. I go, oh my God, there's something here. I didn't know this existed. And then it would close down and I would be the same grumpy person, but it planted a seed. And, so I started then, and then it just got more, I can remember doing a training. I was involved with the Forum and Landmark, which Warner Earhart had started. And I remember one teacher said, all this talking we're doing, if you just go to a 3-day retreat and don't talk, you will see your whole life open in front of you, and it will something will wake up that will really touch you, but you'll be tortured for a while, but something is there. And that was the first time I had done a sitting meditation with eyes open. So, and it's just sort of continued along. And of course, in the Gurdjieff work, there's a lot of work on developing quiet mind and also sensing the body. So your body's, I know all the traditions do that in some form or another, but I wouldn't leave home without it. It just seems.
I loved what you said, where, what those early experience of meditation, and you're going, oh, something's here. Something's here.
I've never seen this before.
And I love it that it's not over there, right?
Yeah.
It's not something you have to go and get. It's here.
Yeah. I went to a community in Amherst called Sirius, who had been deeply engaged at Findhorn in Scotland.
Oh yeah.
And I'd gone to one of their workshops, and I thought, oh, this is such bunk, all this new age crap. And I came home, and I'd been meditating every day for about 3 weeks, and all of a sudden, I just felt like I was in rapt communion with God. And I was an atheist, and I was saying, God. I'm going, what is going on here? And my heart was just bursting with joy. And for about 4 weeks, I dropped all my grievances towards other people. And then they came back, of course. And my instructor said, now you have to earn your way back into that. You've been given a
Yeah.
stroke of the divine. But that's what got me going. I was 28 and I went, diehard atheist, and boom. So
That's
anyway,
great to hear. I love you sharing that, Michael. Thank you so much.
yeah, absolutely. I've been chills. Just it's yeah, those are powerful when the veil kind of drifts away. So I was just wondering if in light of we're talking about the two and your beautiful evolution over time. It's like if if you had if you're looking back at your younger self, um, your two patterns. Would you have anything in particular that you might suggest that as for helping twos not get discouraged or having more compassion or I mean it's whenever anybody asks me that question I go, well, there's about 900 things had to happen for me to get here. I don't know where to start, but uh anything that comes to mind for you if
Yeah, because I have an ornery side.
Mhm.
Um, I'll say that nothing has to happen.
Yeah,
Zero, zilch, nothing
I like
has
that.
to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same. It's very similar to saying it's not out there, it's not over there, it's
Mm,
here, it's
yeah,
right now. Even as you and I are speaking,
yeah.
that's what I would say. And I would also I would say that in the context of a relationship, because I would say that not as uh, zero. I'll see you later. Bye. No, not that. But zero. Welcome.
Mm,
There's a not, perhaps it's not a beginning of a relationship, but it's a continuation of a
mm.
relationship. That's what I would say, and it's still a great challenge to me how to say that to people so that they'll understand that, um,
Absolutely.
whether they're in the category of students
Mhm.
or just friends or family.
Mm.
I think it underscores the depth of the relationship that you can be with people because they have to the extent that there's any figuring out to do, they have to do that.
Absolutely. I was just I was reading one of my favorite teachers is this guy named Bennett, and he had a profound teaching that I just want to share if I can find it. It won't take too long, but
Yeah.
yeah, here it is. So he says, sometimes I say to myself, there's no reason why other people should take as long as I've taken. I've made so many mistakes. Surely I can help them not to make the same mistakes. But it's the same as with our children, whom we want to save from making all the mistakes that we are now able to see. It does not work out like that. Everyone has to learn for him or herself from their own experience. There are some things that are useless, and I have known it all along. For me to try to convey to you nothing but the bitterness of one's own experience and the joy of one's own experience can convey it. And it's like that resonates for me.
Yeah, the bitterness and the joy both.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's yeah. There's no fix it formula.
No, but that to me underlines what I was saying a minute ago about the relationship, how important the relationship is, whether the other person is asking something of us or not.
Mm,
Somehow the I don't know what the right word is, but the ability to remain in the relationship and keep the relationship alive
hmm.
seems really important because as we're saying, we can't do their work, the other person's work for them. They have to do
Yeah,
that, whether it's suffering or joy.
yeah,
And yet they don't, if if they can see their way to it, they don't have to do it alone. I
yeah.
mean, it's individual work, yes, but they don't have to be lonely.
Hmm.
And to the extent that someone like you in this case asks me
Hmm.
about my life or different parts of my life, That's an invitation, and I can accept that invitation. And there's the creative part of the relationship. The relationship burgeons and grows. And I think that's, for me, it's been really important to find teachers who had that quality of sharing their own life. Andrew Harvey comes to mind again. He's probably way over the top, but he has that ability to share what he's experienced. One time he was here teaching at CHIME, and I was driving him somewhere between, you know, a meal and a presentation or something, and I wanted to show him my neighborhood here in Portland. So I said, "That's my house," and Andrew yells at me, "Stop the car!" And he gets out and he charges in the house. This is complete, you know, we're late for this appointment wherever we're going. He charges in the house. He doesn't even go in the living room. He goes up the stairs. "What's up here, Jacob?" Completely off the wall, but that's who he is. And he wanted not only to share himself, but he wanted to know about my life. Where do you live? What's this room? What do you do here? Yeah. So that was a great lesson to me.
That's awesome.
The connection that he creates.
Well, you know, he wrote a book, something like Sacred Hope or Sacred Activism, which is where he talks about how he had talked and worked with some rather evil-oriented corporate folks who felt quite fine about destroying the earth, and then just how, you know, part of his spiritual practice is trying to be an agent of healing for the planet and all of that. And I thought, you know, it was very rich in terms of saying, you know, if your spiritual work is just to be at home and transform and not take it someplace, there's something missing here. And
that's his book, The Hope.
Yeah, The Hope. That's what it was. Yeah.
But yeah, he does. And it's interesting because he's willing to have the conversations with those business people.
Yes.
And show up. And that's priceless.
Yeah.
And here we are. We're on Earth Day today.
Yes.
Greta Thunberg's going to be on TV tonight. I mean, the time is always right. It's not just Earth Day, but the time is always right.
Yeah. And he's done some pretty intensive trainings around just, you know, the terror of the moment and what's going on the planet, which again, he's, you know, not unafraid to speak to that. Like,
I had another lesson from him some years ago when he was just starting the Institute for Sacred Activism. He gathered, I don't know, it was probably 12 or 15 people together. I was one of them. And he was kind of trying out the program on us. And I thought, oh, this is great. I can be in at the ground floor, you know, and maybe I can influence this a little bit and put my own kind of ideas in here. And so we went to Chicago for, I think it was 4 weekends during the year. And it unnerved me a little bit that there were somewhat different people there each time. We all had our input. He had a couple of teachers come in, and I thought I might be able to teach as part of this. And I remember coming home and writing like pages and pages of suggestions and so forth. And if you're going to do this, you do this and this and that. And he completely ignored all of my suggestions, all of our input. He had his own idea of what he wanted to do, and he was just trying out his own ideas on us. And clearly he was on the right track. He didn't really need us. But anyway, that was an interesting lesson as well from Andrew. Dear Andrew.
Yeah. Does he still have that institute? Is it still up?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So, you know, in the Enneagram world, we think that he's a type 4, which is the individualist, and you know, creative, you know, and that's a whole nother story. But yeah. Well, I wonder if there's anything else you'd like to share about your journey, you know, as a redeemed 2.
Yeah, perhaps just to bring it up to date, because I'm at the point now in my life where, and I think this is true for you and many of us, we've done a lot of things. And so because we've had those experiences, we know we can do a lot of things. The key is not to grow cobwebs for me. I can do a lot of things because I look back and, I did that. But is that still what keeps me juicy and alive and
Mhm.
relevant and centered in my heart
Mm,
now?
mm.
It's always the up to date in
Yes.
the present moment.
Yeah.
So that continues to be a great challenge for me and great teacher. It was absolutely right for me to leave Chime and turn Chime over to other people, and they're doing just a wonderful job
Mm,
keeping the school alive and
mm,
making the transition to virtual classes and so forth. I'm not even sure I could have done that, but they're doing that, and
mm,
there's lots of students showing up.
mm,
So, and the teaching I'm doing but myself in Zoom. I watched Ken Ross invited me to do some I would call them old Kubler-Ross teachings,
mhm,
and I turned him down. I said, no, they're just, I don't want to do it. And he was fine with that. And so I have to be more vigilant than ever because I have a lot of experience, not to go backwards, but to stay
mm,
relevant to myself in the
mm.
present moment. And sometimes that means not doing anything.
Yeah.
So I'm doing less teaching now,
Mm,
and who knows? I don't know what will be
mm.
around the corner. So the time of not knowing.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely in that territory too. And I appreciate, I hear again, there's that inner listening from your heart.
Mm,
And often say about when the type 2 is under less stress and experience more healing, that they have a really strong intuitive heart, and that it's sometimes we call it the clean heart. I give without attachments, and I'm not attached to what I've given. It's like I can let it go. I'm not still hanging on to it. There's
yeah.
a way, so it's clean. It's like I've done.
Thank you to the Buddhist tradition. Let us let go of attachments.
Yes, yes, and if you don't, we'll just take them away from you.
Yeah, yeah. So I think what emerges is more silence,
Mm,
and I think for me, my relationships with my family and my friends,
mm,
they as the teaching sort of things, the other things drop
mm,
gently away. What
mm,
emerges is
mm,
silence and the relationships with people I love, my
mm,
family in particular,
mm.
and um, yeah, that's just where it is right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you so much. It's just
Oh,
really a blessing to be with you, and just
thank
so
you, Mark.
appreciate your beautiful being. And
You likewise.
I hope we get to spend more time together. I just
I would like that.
yeah, and
Many blessings.
yeah, and much love to you. And I will send you the link if you want to watch yourself. And I'll be in touch with you.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, many
Bye.
blessings.
Bye.
All right, bye now.